Next, I have for you a dear friend and mentor to me. Maybe he didn't know that before, but he does now. And I would say our most beloved living Texas historian. He had a chance to know General Matthews in a way that I didn't, and I know he's going to talk about that, and it's as someone who would become our most beloved living historian, that he tangled with General Matthews is kind of a big deal. Steve's career is also grounded in these papers because he does focus on the Revolution. Some of his greatest hits include Texian Iliad, Texian Macabre, and if I can talk about it, he has a new book in the pipeline about the experiences of Texians during the runaway scrape that breaks some new historical ground. He is a professor of history at McMurray State University, but if you recognize his face or you recognize his voice, it ain't from McMurray in Abilene. It is from his hits on probably the History Channel. We get recognized when we go places. He also gets recognized at various Austin eateries because he's so entrenched in old school Austin eateries. I think you're going to like what Steve has to say. Welcome, Dr. Stephen Hardin.
Thank you, Michelle, for that warm and generous introduction. Get you a check this afternoon. I hope you will pardon me if I sit to speak to you. I'm not unlike a 70-year-old book whose spine is starting to crack. Truthfully, the volume needs to be completely rebound. But I've talked to people about that, and they've told me to rebind a volume this big would cost a fortune. So it's cheaper just to treat it gingerly, hoping the whole thing doesn't fall apart. But the year 1973 was memorable for a number of reasons. In January, U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War ostensibly ended with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords. That was in March. The Godfather won the Academy Award for Best Picture. And somewhat incongruously, on the day after Christmas, The Exorcist opened in 24 theaters. Yeah, when I think of Christmas, The Exorcist is what comes to mind. Have you seen that movie? At any rate. However, in Texas history circles, the big event of that year was the Presidial Press publication of the 10-volume The Papers of the Texas Revolution, 1835-1836. The brain baby of Brigadier General J.A. Matthews, Jr. of the Texas National Guard, the PTR, as the set quickly became known among Texas historians, was, as its compiler and editor-in-chief, John H. Jenkins III, rather immodestly asserted, the most extensive collection of primary resources relating to the Texas Revolution, and also the largest compilation of original source materials on any Texas subject. End quote. Ostentatious Jenkins may have been, but I'm reminded of an old Texas saying, "It ain't bragging if you can do it." And Matthews and Jenkins did it. The set's introduction gave readers some notion of its extensiveness. This work should be useful for the following reasons. 1, it prints several thousand important letters and documents on the Texas Revolution, never published before in any form. 2, it prints hundreds of letters and documents that were printed during the Revolutionary era, but which have hitherto been virtually lost for historical purposes because of the rarity of the original printing or the obscurity of its location. And 3, it includes all material within its scope from all sources, including modern works, thus presenting for the first time the full primary source material on the Texas Revolution in chronological sequence. The plan of the work is to include all letters and documents relating to the Texas Revolution written between January 1st, 1835, and the inauguration of Sam Houston as President of the Republic of Texas on October 2nd, 1836. All material known to the editor has been included, with the exception of letters and documents of a personal or business nature and not related to the Revolution, end quote. So not ambitious at all. PTR made quite the splash when it landed in 1973, but I was totally oblivious. I had more pressing issues on my mind. 50 years ago, I was a student at Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos. No, check that. I was an enrollee at SWT. Believe me, scholarship was the last issue on my mind. During that time, co-eds outnumbered the young men by a ratio of 3-to-1. In the days before political correctness and the #MeToo movement, we were pleased to refer to such favorable odds as a target-rich environment. Moreover, Southwest Texas had established a well-deserved reputation as a party school, a reputation I devoted myself to upholding. During the bicentennial year, and to the amazement of my friends, I finally graduated with a double major Bachelor of Arts degree in History and English. Suffice it to say, I did not graduate magna cum laude. Maturity arrived slowly, like a thief in the night. By the early 1980s, I was working toward my master's degree, again at SWT. I found the pleasures of San Marcos difficult to abandon. Besides, I had wonderful mentors, Dr. James W. Pohl in history and Dr. Edgar S. Laird in English, both of whom encouraged my intellectual growth. Inspired by their example, I became a serious student, finally. I had always had an interest in history, but now I became committed to it. The difference between interest and commitment, I learned, is immense. It was about that time that I met General Matthews. I had learned about an establishment just off Lamar Boulevard in Austin called Military History Associates. It sounded like my kind of place, and it was. Imagine a multi-room office complex filled with works of military history from every period. Even better, some rooms featured original military art, So it was a combination bookshop art gallery. It was both surprising and impressive, but no less so than its proprietor. Envision your stereotypical hard-charging general, and then envision the opposite, and you'll have a pretty good notion of Jay Matthews, at least during the time that I knew him. He reminded me of the Keebler elf, a shock of white hair, sparkling eyes, a ready smile, and above all, a boundless enthusiasm. People who share the same passions tend to seek each other out, and we immediately hit it off. At that time, General Matthews was the editor of a fine journal titled Military History of Texas and the Southwest, and I bought several back issues to inform my master's thesis. He commissioned original art for the covers of some issues. Many of these featured the work of his friend Joseph J. Hefter. Once Jay had used the art for the covers, he made the original canvases available for purchase. I bought two. One was called Sentry at the Alamo. In those days, I was a competitive saber fencer. I know, but remember, this was 40 years and 100 pounds ago. I convinced the Southwest Texas State Fencing Society to host a tournament, the Alamo Open, and used the proceeds to buy Sentry. Then we donated it to the Alamo, where it remains part of its permanent collection. You know, we weren't partying all the time, so occasionally we did something good. The other I bought for me. It depicted a Texas Ranger of the Mexican War. General Matthews took pains to tell me about the artist. A native of Austria, Joseph J. Hefter fought in the First World War as a member of the Austro-Hungarian Army. During the Second World War, he worked with the American Office of Strategic Services against the Nazis. After the war, he moved to the United States, became active in the Company of Military Historians, and painted several uniform plates for that organization. And it was during that period that Jay and Mr. Hefter became friends. Becoming disenchanted with life in the United States, Hefter immigrated to Mexico, married a Mexican woman, and devoted himself to documenting and illustrating Mexican military history. His efforts culminated in the now classic El Soldado Mexicano. Hefter's study of the Texas Ranger represents the ultimate Mexicanization of his work. This is a ranger as the Mexicans would have viewed him: blonde, menacing, and absolutely festooned with weapons. A Diablo Tejano. Hefter even managed to make his mount appear foreboding. Living in Mexico had altered his perspective and his color palette. As General Matthews observed, in this piece, the artist employed a pink beige that is distinctly Mexican. This Hefter watercolor has hung on my walls for more than 40 years. Even now, I smile when I walk by it. No small part of the pleasure I derive from it involves from my memories of Jay's role in its acquisition, his insight, and his kindness. Now, I know from where you're sitting you can't see it very well, but come up here and look at it when you have a chance. In 1985, I finished my master's degree at Southwest Texas and moved to Fort Worth to pursue the PhD. It was there in the Special Collections Library at TCU I came across a book that was to change my life. It was John H. Jenkins' 1983 publication of Basic Texas Books, an annotated bibliography of selected works for a research library. It's difficult to remember all these years later, but it must have been through Jenkins that I finally became aware of the PTR. Consider my delight when I discovered that the TCU library owned a set, and I could check out individual volumes and take them home. The PTR became pivotal to the research leading to my dissertation, which my committee approved in 1989. In 1994, the University of Texas Press published my revised dissertation as Texian Iliad, a military history of the Texas Revolution. That book, which established my reputation, would have been impossible without the papers of the Texas Revolution. More than that, this seminal collection of original materials has made my entire career possible. I acquired my own set in the mid-90s. My dear friend, Kevin R. Young, was a talented avocational historian but lived from paycheck to paycheck. In order to pay the rent, he often had to sell off prized possessions. His friends used to laugh about Kevin's fire sales. One day he called me asking if I'd like to buy his set of the PTR. I hesitated accepting his offer, not wishing to take an advantage of a friend in need. I knew how much the set meant to him. He explained, "Look, Steve, I'm going to have to sell them anyway, and I'd rather they go to a friend than a stranger. Besides, if you have them, I'll know where they are, and I can use them when I need to." I found his logic impeccable and agreed to buy his set. If memory serves, I paid $600, which even then was a steal. In 2012, Kevin dropped dead of a massive heart attack while still in his 50s. I miss him every day and hope that he believed that I had put his PTR to good use. About 5 years ago, I acquired a second set. Bookseller Maggie Lambeth, knowing my research interest, notified me that she had a complete set of the PTR deacquisitioned from the New Braunfels Public Library, and wondering if I'd be interested. Now, she let me know up front that these were not in collector's condition since they bore library markings. That greatly reduced Maggie's asking price, and I was able to buy her set for the same price I had paid Kevin years ago. When Deb and I drove to Maggie's house to pick up the books, I asked her why on earth the New Braunfels librarians would let such a rare and valuable set go. She told me ruefully, "They said that none of their patrons ever used them." Rick, that won't surprise you. I can readily believe that. Nowadays, my enrollees had rather undergo root canal surgery before they enter a library or crack what they call a dead tree book. If they can't find material online, they stop looking. I have often received papers that contained nothing but online citations. That's true. Of course, I hurt them with my red pen for their negligence, but that seems to have done nothing to correct their behavior. We at the Texas History Trust anticipate that these bibliophobes will be more inclined to access the papers of the Texas Revolution in their new digitized format and from the comfort of their dorm rooms. Sadly, copies of the PTR have become scarce, difficult to locate on the collector's market, and expensive to acquire when one does. About 2 years ago, a friend of mine was able to purchase a set in pristine condition for a mere $1,800. The Lord only knows what the price would be now. The fact is that this valuable collection is virtually unavailable to the majority of Texans unaffiliated with a big research university. And even there, the set has become so rare that special collections librarians are likely to protect it behind lock and key. But no longer. Through its Taproot project, the Texas History Trust is making not only the PTR, but a vast array of essential but hard-to-find materials available to all Texans on an easily accessible online platform and free of charge. Free. For too long, Texans have been separated from their history. That stops now. That stops now. We like to imagine 7th graders reading primary documents for the first time, struggling grad students able to call up archival materials around the clock, and avocational historians retrieving singular documents formerly available only to specialists. This effort represents a bold democratization of Texas history. This is your history. Read it, enjoy it, learn from it, glory in it. We at the Texas History Trust believe that our history is far too important to be the exclusive province of professors. 50 years ago, J. Matthews stated his goals for the papers of the Texas Revolution. This is what he wrote then. The Presidial Press is proud to offer these works in the conviction that they will make a significant contribution to the future study and understanding of the Texas Revolution and the military history and heritage of Texas. Mission accomplished, General. Mission accomplished. Thank you for your attention.